Welcome to Hayes Reviews. So the first thing we're going to talk about tonight is democracy. We all know what that is. We all know we all love it. We know it's the best system that's ever been invented. We know the unprecedented levels of freedom and peace that it has brought to the world to have these democratic systems. The wealth that we enjoy, the comfort, the luxury, not having to go to work, having anything we want at our beck and call at a moment's notice, enjoying unparalleled levels of health, peace of mind, the freedom to go wherever you want, do whatever you want with whoever you want. It's really incredible the blessings and the benefits that democracy have brought to the human species. Of course, I'm being sarcastic and facetious, but we're going to learn a bit about democracy tonight because, as I said before, we're on the part of Vernon Coleman's book which deals with words, topics, concepts, quotes, ideas that begin with C. And we're going to be moving on into the D section tonight. And part of what's coming up is democracy. So I thought this would be a good place to start with our preamble ramble. So as always, or not as always, but as very often we like to do on this channel, we've got Wikipedia open to see what is the consensus reality. What are we supposed to think about this idea of democracy? And we're going to start here and read a little bit about from the top of this article because it is long. It's a humongous bit of writing, and we're not going to go through all of it. It's very well referenced, though. This is one of the most well referenced things I've seen on Wikipedia. In fact, we've got like 300 references and counting, but we're not going to go into that much depth. I've got a few clips that I want to play for people tonight as well. Get them on the record. It's really good stuff regarding this concept of democracy, which we are told is the best system ever and that we're living in, and we're so lucky to be living under it. So what is it? Well, the word democracy itself comes from demos, which means people, and kratos, which means rule. So it's rule of the people. Wikipedia says it's a form of government in which political power is vested in the people or the population of a state. Under a minimalist definition of democracy, rulers are elected through competitive elections, while more expansive or maximalist definitions link democracy to guarantees of civil liberties and human rights in addition to competitive elections. So the important thing here is really to do with elections and this benefit that we have to participate in these every so often. And as I was reading this, I thought about the word people, and I thought, do you know what? I would like to know this some more about the origins of this word people. So I had a little dig over on Etym Online, and this was quite interesting. So people as a noun comes from the year 1300, from the word peuple. I don't know how that's pronounced, but I'm going to guess it's peuple. And it means humans, persons in general, men and women. So I'm glad they included the human aspect. I'm glad they included the men and the women aspect, although these days some people aren't quite sure what they are. But this person's word is in there as well, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, has another meaning, which means mask. Person, persona. You can, I think it has a connection with the masks that actors used to wear back in the day, in I don't know, maybe ancient Greece or somewhere like that. But at least back in 1300s, peuple meant humans, human men and women. So we're off to a promising start. There's a French meaning here, which is peuple. The word is peuple or pupelle, which means people. So that's a helpful definition. But also means population, crowd, mankind as a whole, or humanity. So it's good that this word still denotes human beings. There's also a Latin populace, a Latin origin populace, which meant a people, nation, a body of citizens, a multitude, crowd, throng. But that is a word of unknown origin, which I thought was curious, that the Latin populace, we don't know where that came from. But this is the bit that really stood out to me. There's an Italian root for this word, which is populari, which means to lay waste, to ravage, plunder, and pillage. What tends to happen to populations of people? In a lot of cases, they get ravaged, plundered, and pillaged. quite often. So I thought curious that the word people has its origin in this word populari, and the connotations associated with that could be quite revealing about what it means to be part of a population, what the purpose of a population is. It's to be ravaged, plundered, and pillaged, because that just seems to be what happens. History shows us that. There's also a Proto-Italic root, which is said to mean army. And this bit was very interesting. In English, it displaced, so we're talking about the word people, displaced the native folk. So I think that means the native word folk. So people used to say folk. Just like Alan Watt, he starts many of his broadcasts, his recordings with hi folks. He says hi folks. And it's very comforting to hear him say that in his beautiful lilting Scottish accent. So perhaps folk had connotations, a meaning that wasn't as useful to the useless elites or the people who give us our language and our words and take it upon themselves to redefine things and alter the language over time. But maybe we should start referring to ourselves as folk, right? Instead of people, which has this connotation of ravage, plunder, and pillaging. But there's a bit of a more interesting context down here from the 1300, the sense of some unspecified persons. So actually we're getting a little away from the humans, the humanity in the meaning, and it's unspecified persons, or personas, or masks. And it says the meaning body of persons comprising a community by mid-14th century. And then it says the meaning common people, masses, as distinguished from the nobility, is from late 13th century. So in the late 13th century, the word people comes to mean the common people, the masses, not the nobility. The nobility are not part of the people, right? The royalty, the elite, the useless elites, the tiny parasitic group of world controllers, they're not part of the people. They're not people. They're something else. That's quite interesting. And then 14th century also had a meaning which was members of one's family, tribe, or clan. Then after 1920, the word people was adopted by communist totalitarian states, according to their opponents, to give a spurious sense of populism to their governments. So this is, it's not looking too good, is it? It is based on the political sense of the word, the whole body of enfranchised citizens, considered as the sovereign source of government power. So there's a lot of history to this word, this common everyday word, people, that I think is curious and worth noting and worth remembering. All these things are tied up in there. It has a long history, and after reading that, I'm kind of thinking maybe we should refer to ourselves and each other as folk. It's got a nicer ring to it, and it's not connected with communist totalitarianism, ravaging, plundering, and pillaging, and a separation from a class of people who like to do that, who are not people, apparently. The nobility are not people. They're separate. But yeah, a little bit of etymology there. So this ties into the word democracy, because demo comes from the word for people. And we'll carry on, because there's a few different kinds of democracy to learn about. So one is direct democracy. This is where the people have the direct authority to deliberate and decide legislation. And there's representative democracy, where the people choose governing officials through elections to do that on their behalf. It says here a little bit about what we were just looking at. The definition of the people and the ways authority is shared among them or delegated by them have changed over time and at varying rates in different countries. Right. So you'll see that this is an evolving thing. It's an evolving system, okay? And there's a bit later on as well where it talks about this being organic. It's this healthy, organic part of evolution, the system that we're living under and that we're heading into. But what are the features of democracy? Well, they are freedom of assembly, freedom of association, personal property, freedom of religion, and freedom of speech. Then we've also got citizenship, consent of the government and voting rights, freedom from unwarranted governmental deprivation of the right to life and liberty, and minority rights. So there's a lot of freedoms, a lot of freedom. It sounds really good when you read this list, right? Wow, there's basically you can do all that in a democracy. Sounds great. I want to live in a democracy, right? But in actual fact, in actual reality, do we have all these things? You know, do we have free speech, for example? Are you allowed to say hurty words on the internet and not have the police knock on your door threatening to take you away and put you in a cage? I'll let you answer that one. Do you have freedom of personal property? Oops, just clicked onto the wrong thing here. Okay, let me deal with this a second. Do you have the freedom to own personal property? I think in a lot of cases, it's very, very difficult to get to a situation where you can own personal property, particularly if you're young, if you are not the beneficiary of money that has been left to you, if your parents aren't able to help you get hold of enough money to secure a loan to put down against a piece of property so that you can pay that off for 35 years, then, you know, technically you are free to own property. But how easy is it to get to that situation for the average Joe and Jane in the street? You know, not that easy, I don't think. So there's a lot rolled up into this. We do have voting rights, of course. We are allowed to do that every so often. And we do have, and then the, you know, minorities do have rights as well. They have a lot of rights. In fact, in some ways, they have more rights than others. Certain resources, they have better, more easier access to certain resources and services than non-minority people. That's a thing that we're seeing being baked into our institutions, our corporations. I was on a training just the other day, in fact, about diversity and inclusivity, and not one bit of the whole training made any sense whatsoever. But I just kept quiet, and I didn't say anything. I asked too many questions. It was a bit of a struggle session. I knew what I was going into, and I'm aware of the purpose of it. But watching people trying to like jump through these trying to perform these mental gymnastics that are totally illogical and self-refuting was kind of entertaining. I just sipped my coffee and kept quiet, you know. So the notion of democracy has evolved considerably over time. So there you are. It's an evolving thing. It's just part of nature. It's natural. It's organic. It's evolving. It's progress, and it's good. Therefore, it tells us that throughout history, one can find evidence of direct democracy in which communities make decisions through popular assembly. You can find evidence of that. You know, it is there, sort of. The wording kind of makes it seem rare, hard to find, makes it seem as though most people wouldn't look for that direct democracy. You know, it is there. You can find evidence of it, but you know, it's not the main kind of democracy. It's not the best kind. It's not the representative democracy. The dominant form of democracy is representative democracy. So I like it how they do mention it, direct democracy, but they kind of like skim over it quickly and get to the thing that we actually have, which is representative democracy, where citizens elect government officials to govern on their behalf. I heard a fantastic term this morning. I was listening to Pirate Radio Broadcast Network on YouTube, and Vinny Eastwood was on there, and he was talking about how Canada has just suffered from a very intense bout of electile dysfunction. And Canadian friends will know what I'm talking about. It is carnage over there at the moment. But yeah, you've got some electile dysfunction going on. I think you need to get that checked out. Maybe go and pop a little blue pill or something. But representative democracy is what we get. It's dominant, and we get to elect people to do stuff on our behalf. It tells us as well, in the common variant of liberal democracy, the powers of the majority are exercised within the framework of a representative democracy, but a constitution and Supreme Court limit the majority and protect the minority. Okay, so it's a rule. So you have the majority make the decisions, but if they make the wrong decisions, there's a minority to make sure the majority don't make the wrong decisions. So the majority are in control, they make the decisions, but only the right ones, the right decisions. And if their decisions are wrong, if the majority makes a wrong decision, then the minority will step in and correct them. Got that? Makes sense, right? The word itself appeared in 5th century BC in Greece, in classical Athens, and it meant rule of the people. And it was a contrast to aristocracy, which meant rule of an elite. In most modern democracies, this was achieved through the suffrage movements of the 19th and 20th centuries. So this reminded me of our reading and the research we did in Fabian Freeway, which connected the whole Fabian socialist movement with the suffrage movements and a sort of gradual rebranding and pivot into democracy and labeling themselves, such as the League for Industrial Democracy was started by a bunch of socialists. And we're going to see a little bit later, I've got some good graphics to show you and other clips to play that will sort of explain this very, very clearly. But yeah, there's a sort of link between socialism and democracy and the suffrage movements of the 19th and 20th century show that very well. And apparently in 2022, there was a study done which said less than half the world's population lives in a democracy. I think that's supposed to be, a bad thing, a terrible thing. So obviously we need to spread more democracy, whether they like it or want it or not. But the characteristics. So no consensus exists on a precise definition of democracy. Great. So it's kind of you make it up. You decide what it means, and you can choose for yourself whether or not you're living in one. It's mad that there's no precise definition for this, right? It says one study identified 2,234 adjectives used to describe democracy in the English language. That's a lot of words. And if by using all those words, we couldn't come to some sort of agreement or understanding about what the word means, it's like, I don't know, it's kind of scary. Because we're all throwing this word around. We hear it all the time. We're told it's fantastic and we live in it, but there's no consensus on what it means. So is it a useful term? Not so much. If there's no agreement upon what the term signifies, if we can't come to terms on what it means, then it's kind of a useless word to throw around, and maybe it doesn't mean anything, and that's part of the point, right? It tells us that democracies may use many different decision-making methods, but majority rule is the dominant form. It also tells us that democracy can also be characterized as a form of political collectivism. So we're looking at communitarianism, collectivism. Of course, collectivism sounds a lot like communism, socialism. It's all kind of wrapped up. It's all very similar. But the majority ruling is an important part of this. But don't forget, we also care about minority rights. This was the thing that was so contradictory about the diversity and inclusivity training that I went on. It was we have to challenge groupthink, and by groupthink, it was challenge, for example, people who don't believe men can become women and vice versa. That's groupthink that we have to challenge. But believing that men and women can change into one another and willy-nilly, no pun intended, that's not groupthink. That's presumably just correct think and has to be enforced. And if you don't think that way, you get punished or you get reported to HR. And all sorts of bad things can happen to you and your career and your income and your ability to buy food. So yes, a lot of contradictory stuff. It's quite vague, wishy-washy, hard to pin down, and I think that's by design. A little bit about the history. It says democratic assemblies are as old as the human species and are found throughout human history. So the system we live in is as old as, it's a natural system for human beings to be living in. But up until the 19th century, major political figures have largely opposed it. That's curious, isn't it? I was surprised to see that there. So it's a relatively newly, it wasn't widely accepted until relatively recently, historically speaking. It says as well that forms of democracy occurred organically in societies around the world that had no contact with each other. So there you are. It is just organic. It is part of evolution. It is as old as the human species, and it is just the natural way for humans to live. And there's also no consensus on a precise definition of what it is. So try and hold that particular piece of doublethink in your mind while we go on to the next tab. So we had a look at that. Oh yeah, and so the key thing about a democracy is the people, or the people. This doesn't apply to us. We're folk, right? On this channel, hi folks, we're folks. We're not people, so this doesn't apply to us. But the people who live in a democracy are enfranchised. So I thought I'd look that word up because it's one of those words. I've heard it. I know what I think it means, but what does it actually mean? Well, if you are enfranchised, it means you give. If you enfranchise someone else, you give a person or group of people the right to vote in elections. So enfranchisement presupposes a group or an entity that has the ability to give a person or group of people the right to vote. Now, what is that group or entity who has that ability to give the right to vote out to other people? Because I thought the democracy is the power of the people, right? I thought we have the power. So are we giving ourselves the right to vote if we have the power? Is that what we're doing? We're just granting ourselves the right to vote, or is there some external entity that is not part of us that is giving us the right to vote? And if that's true, then who are they? And why do they have the right to give us the right to vote? And why do we not have the right to give ourselves the right to vote? You see? A lot of questions. But another page that popped up and I thought would be worth dwelling on in this little preamble is newocracy. So this is another sort of form of government, part of the politics series, as you can see here. Newocracy. This was a new term for me. I hadn't seen it before, but newocracy comes from nous, which means mind or intellect, and kratos, which means power. And this is a type of government where decisions are delegated to those deemed wisest. And actually, just saying that reminds me of a book I have down here, which is Jonas Salk's book, The Survival of the Wisest. That's one we definitely got to read on this channel at some point. It's quite a slender book, but Survival of the Wisest. Have a quick look up that one. See how much it costs. It's going to be a good read. But newocracy. So the wisest are the people who make the decisions. This idea is classically advanced, among others, by Plato, Al-Farabi, and Confucius, who we're going to hear about tonight. Vernon Coleman has, I think, included a quote by Confucius in his book. But when we did another preamble ramble, I think 2 weeks ago, we focused on technocracy, and I mentioned there that this idea goes all the way back to Plato. Plato is, a lot of people would think of Plato as the oldest in time, in terms of history and time, the oldest, smartest originator of the modern world and the modern way of thinking. Okay, Plato and Aristotle, and their philosophy. They're very legendary. But Plato did advocate for this kind of newocracy, this kind of technocracy, whereby a small elite with a certain set of skills and knowledge and information would make the decisions and steer society, the masses of society. And he even advocated a kind of, I think it's like a 4-class system, where you'd have that philosopher king and the wise men at the top, and then there would be a sort of priest class, and then a soldier class, and then everybody else, the people, right? The people would be at the bottom, and the non-people would be above them. So there's a lot to this language that's being used. But newocracy, a new term for me. Let's read a little bit about the development of that. So this fella, Mikhail Epstein, defined newocracy as, quote, the thinking matter increases its mass in nature, and geo and biosphere grow into noosphere. The future of the humanity can be envisioned as newocracy. That is the power of the collective brain, rather than separate individuals representing certain social groups or society as a whole. So, tapping into the collective brain in a similar way as the democracy taps into the majority consensus. The collective brain, the worldview that is most common among a given group of people. That's really what collective brain refers to. Because you get a whole group of people together, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to make better decisions or be more productive or make more progress on a given project, goal, or endeavor, right? So but we kind of see this coming up quite a lot, the power of the collective, the idea that large groups of people can have a sort of cumulative effect. The more people you add, the more intelligent they are collectively. But I just don't think that's necessarily true. It's kind of, I don't even know if the collective brain is a real thing. I think what they're referring to really is just the consensus. What do most people think about the world? And that comes down largely to propaganda and education and teaching and schooling and cultural institutions and the reinforcement of those by way of parents impressing upon the young what they themselves think and learn, right? So yeah, the collective brain. Anyway, this is part of the newocracy, is the power of the collective brain and the subordination of the individual to the power of the collective brain. So that's a really key concept. And one of the things that we see again and again and again is the argument for centralization of power and control is that, we can't let an individual make decisions. We got to make sure it's diffused and dispersed. But continuing, in a more concrete sense, one might find pertinent the paradigmatic controversy surrounding genetically modified food or organisms. So it was interesting that they used this example here. It says, here the opinions of a likely underinformed public and those of experts are well known to be starkly in conflict. So on the topic of GMO food, genetically modified food and organisms, I want to bring to people's attention this book, which is Seeds of Deception. And that's by Jeffrey M. Smith. And so if you happen to be a member of the likely underinformed public, you can pick up that book. It's cheap. It's widely available. And you can get yourself informed and take yourself out of the underinformed group and put yourself in the informed group, right? But of course, the experts know more and they know better and they are trained and they have the information. And us underinformed members of the public can possibly understand how important it is to eat genetically modified food and allow genetically modified organisms to exist. But this even ties into Preamble Ramble from last week, which was all about techno-Gaianism, if you recall. And a key pillar of techno-Gaianism was genetic modification, not just of food, but also of humans. Remember, they want to make us into nocturnal, vegan hobbits, small in stature, so we don't need as much food, and nocturnal, so we don't have to use as much energy for light, so we're comfortable in the dark, and vegan, so we don't eat meat, because we all know that's terrible for the environment, isn't it? So I wasn't surprised really to see the example of genetically modified food pulled up here, but the point they're trying to make is that this stupid public who are skeptical about these products, that if only they would listen to the experts, you know. But the dangers of GMO foods, as detailed in this book, Seeds of Deception, are incredibly scary, really scary. You can see the little banner across the top there on the very front page, the warning that they've put in the ad, which says, warning, GM foods could seriously damage your health. That's right. That's on the front cover of the book. They're so intent on getting that message to people, they put it right on the front cover, you know. So you don't even have to open the book to look into it. But there you go. There's a few bits here about the possible modalities of newocracy. They talk about Jason Brennan's taxonomy of the roughly equivalent concept he himself calls epistocracy, which is another word for newocracy. So some of the ways that this could be rolled out, for example, is restricted suffrage. So give voting rights only to those who prove themselves sufficiently well informed to earn the right to vote. And of course, the way you do that is by taking a test. Like, yes, we need exams and tests. We need you to regurgitate information on command within a little time frame and regurgitate the exact information that we tell you to memorize beforehand. So that's not any way to assess a person's standing with regards to whether they can lead or make decisions, right? Just a test, like an exam. They can be, you can cheat, you can, it's only, exams and tests, they only measure a person's ability to regurgitate information. That's it. But that's one idea of newocracy, is to test people and only give the voting rights to those who pass the test. You can take everyone can take the exam, it says, but only those who show mastery of the basic concepts of political science, economics, and sociology would earn permission to vote. So how much do you want to bet that when they say economics, they're talking about Keynesian economics, who was a Fabian socialist? When they say political science, they're talking about the kind of stuff we were just reading on the democracy Wikipedia page, right? And not the kind of stuff that you're going to see later in this intro, right? So it'll be their version of these three topics that is authorized, that is approved by the world controllers, the useless eliters. It'd be their version of these subjects that you have to master in order to earn your right to vote in this system. It says but it does say that they would focus the questions on objective topics. Yeah, okay. I'll believe that when I see it. To create an incentive, voters who pass the test could receive $1,000. Ooh. And if you fail the test, but you want to vote, you can pay a penalty of $2,000. So that's restricted suffrage under a newocratic system. There's also plural voting. Everyone gets a vote, but the better educated, more informed get more votes. So everyone is equal, but some are more equal than others. John Stuart Mill apparently came up with this. There's also enfranchisement lottery. So this is where there's a random lottery to decide who gets to vote in each election. And there's also epistocratic veto, where every citizen has the right to vote, but an epistocratic branch of government could overrule the democratic deliberations. So again, it's the majority make the decision, but if they make the wrong decision, there's a minority here to correct them and make sure they make the right decision. It says people with conflicts of interest would be disqualified. There would be a council of expert overseers who couldn't create new legislation, but could overrule decisions it deems misguided. The council could block the candidacies of unqualified candidates. And there was a fourth one here called simulated oracle that I didn't understand, so I'm not even going to mention that one. So rationales for newocracy. So this is interesting because this is kind of criticizing democracy. It says irrationality of voters. So a newocracy would be better because voters are irrational. Proponents of the newocratic theory, right? It's just a theory, cite evidence that suggests voters in modern democracies are largely ignorant, misinformed, and irrational. See? So kind of like the likely underinformed public who don't want a bunch of scientists fecking around with the genetic structure of food and animals. Similarly, presumably if the public got together and said, you know what, we actually don't want to be in this system, we don't want anyone to rule over us, they would be deemed ignorant, misinformed, and irrational, and ignored, perhaps. But it says on the irrationality of voters, it can be explained by two major behavioral cognitive patterns. So firstly, most of the voters think that the marginal contribution of their vote will not make a difference on election outcomes. Therefore, they do not find it useful to inform themselves on political matters. There's so much bias in this, right? Firstly, that's been shown that your vote has basically no impact on anything. That has been shown by, I want to say Stanford did some sort of study into this. If anyone knows it in the comments, please let me know, because my memory is crap. But there was some sort of mainstream educational institution that did an investigation into how much impact your vote has, and they found it was like basically none. They published it. It was a mainstream admission, not conspiracy text. So if you read that and you accept the findings of that particular study, and you know this to be true, or at least you accept their methodology, and then you say, okay, well, I'm convinced and I believe this now, and I accept that this is something that is true, then you're ignorant, misinformed, and irrational. And therefore, we need a newocracy. So that's the implication, right? If you have come to that conclusion that your vote doesn't make a difference to the selections, and that there's always going to be an electile dysfunction no matter what you do, then you're ignorant, misinformed, and irrational, obviously, and you don't deserve to have a vote. Continuing, though, it also says that due to the required time and effort of acquiring new information, voters rationally prefer to remain ignorant. Oh, it's too much time and effort to learn. Learning. Ugh. Read a book? No, thank you. Give me Netflix. I want to watch Sopranos. There's probably some truth to that. People tend not to want to put any effort in, really, to learning and acquiring new information. It's a huge part of the problem, and I wish more people would put in some time for learning and acquiring new information, because they might, let's say you did start putting some time into learning and acquiring new information, and you read that study which said that your vote doesn't do anything. Then you come to the conclusion that it's pointless voting. and then you don't go and vote, and then you get called ignorant, misinformed, and irrational, and they install a newocracy without your permission. Can't win. This bit was interesting. It has been shown that most citizens process political information in deeply biased, partisan, motivated ways rather than in dispassionate, rational ways. So, of course, we need our dispassionate, unemotional experts to step in and be objective. We've got, we've got all these messy emotions, and we are biased. We have in-group preferences and out-group suspicions, and we can't be trusted to make objective, rational decisions. Do you know what we need to do? We need some sort of, reliably dispassionate, objective, I don't know, like an AI system or something, maybe a piece of software that could do it for us. Wouldn't that be good? Take all the human emotion out of it, remove all that messy stuff, and just have it objective, fact-based, data-driven. That's what we need. We don't need a newocracy. We need AIocracy. But one of the, continuing with the article, is it says this psychological phenomenon, so being biased and partisan, causes voters to strongly identify themselves with a group, certain political group, specifically find evidence to support arguments aligning with their preferred ideological inclinations, and eventually vote with a high level of bias. I think that is pretty true for a lot of people. Quite a lot of people seek out information which backs up what they already think. So continuing, this is more rationales for newocracy. Democracy is susceptible to bad policies. Oh, really? So it says, irrational political behaviors of voters prevent them from making calculated choices and opting for the right policy proposals. I was just wondering, what are the right? Who's decided what the right policy proposals are? Again, it's like the disenfranchisement. It implies that there is a right policy proposal. Well, who's come to that judgment? Who's found that out? Who's tested that? It's like you have the freedom to choose, but make sure you choose the right policy, okay? It says, on the other hand, many political experiments have shown that as voters get more informed, they tend to support better policies. Oh, really? Demonstrating that acquisition of information has a direct impact on rational voting. Wow. What a groundbreaking discovery. They've even footnoted that. It's in the book Against Democracy. Another rationale for newocracy is the use of expertise for efficient outcomes. So according to newocrats, given the complex nature of political decisions, it's not reasonable to assume that a citizen would have the necessary knowledge to decide on means to achieve their political aims. Again, I was questioning who is their political aims here. I suppose it means the citizens' political aims. But I didn't read it like that at first. I was like, whose political aims? The politicians? The parasites? In general, I think most citizens have the same sort of political aims, really. It's kind of, more freedom, please. Well, actually, no, that's not true. I shouldn't speak on behalf. Like, a lot of people are very scared of freedom. They don't want freedom. They want to be taken care of and looked after and have everything done for them and be told what to think and what to say and where to go and what to do. Some people are like that. It says, in general, political actions require a lot of social scientific knowledge from various fields, such as economics, sociology, and international relationship and public policy. However, an ordinary voter is hardly specialized enough in any of those fields to make it the optimal decision. Well, the reason that you're not specialized enough is because you've been dumbed down by schooling and television, right? You can possibly understand the intricacies and the complexity of economics, Keynesian economics, of course, sociology, international relations as dictated and defined by the Council on Foreign Relations and the Royal Institute for International Affairs, and public policy as defined by the Fabian socialists. No, you couldn't do that. You're just an ordinary voter, hardly specialized enough. to make the optimal decision. So again, so there's the right policy proposal and there's the optimal decision. And you can sort of see where the arguments for an AIocracy are going to come from. They're going to be very similar to this, I would say. And there's an example here of Singapore. It says that Singapore is structured in such a way that only those with above average skills are identified with strict university entrance exams. Of course, it's exams. And then rigorously trained to be able to devise best the solutions that benefit the entire society. Well, I'm sure that's what they tell you, but I bet it's still a little pyramid system with a lot of wealth going upwards and not much of it going down. It does admit here that Singapore is a technocracy, so that aligns with what we read and learned about technocracy in 2 weeks ago. In order to develop further Singapore's technocratic system, some thinkers have proposed for the country to adopt a model of direct technocracy, demanding citizen input in essential matters through online polls and referendums, etc. So, demanding you participate in their system online. So it's going to be a smartphone-based, digital ID-based system where you are commanded to participate, whether you want to or not. And then that data will be analyzed by a committee of experts. This single sentence here probably tells us everything we need to know about what's coming. They're just trialing it in Singapore first. But there are some criticisms of newocracy, and there's a whole section on criticisms here saying that it's anti-democratic and that experts can be inefficient, and there's a rejection of demographic unjustness of newocracy. And I got to this point in the article and I thought it reminded me of some of the resources and videos that I've got, and I thought, you know what, these other people have covered this topic and dealt with it so well, better than I ever could, that I might as well just play their stuff, get that on the record for this little preamble ramble. So that's what we're going to do next. So this is a little just under 7-minute video. I'm going to play it a bit faster so we can get through it quicker. And this is from Larken Rose, and the video is called The Tiny Dot. So again, on this topic of democracy, on this topic of voting and rights and elections and politicians and newocracy and experts, I think this little fable communicates some of the problems with that system and even implies the solution to that system. So it's worth just playing in full. So I'm gonna give this a go now. Enjoy.
100 million people. They had different interests, different beliefs, different occupations, but for the most part, they got along pretty well. Then one day, a gang of a few hundred people showed up. Need to zoom in some more to see them. I know they're there somewhere. Zoom in. There they are. And this gang of a few hundred said to the throng of 100 million, "From now on, you all have to give us a cut of everything you earn."
This is an accurate graphical comparison between the number of American taxpayers and the number of U.S. congressmen.
And the throng said, "Gosh, do we have to give you a cut of what we earn?" And the gang of a few hundred said, "Yes, you have to." And the throng said, "Well, okay, I guess we have to." And one little troublemaker asked, "What if we don't?" The gang of a few hundred didn't like this and said, "If you do not comply, we shall unleash upon you our legions of enforcers." And the throng cried, "Oh no, please don't. We will comply, we will pay."
This is an accurate graphical comparison between the number of American taxpayers and the total number of IRS employees.
Time went by, and the gang of a few hundred said, "Now we want more of what you earn." And this kept happening over and over again, until eventually some of the throng were paying almost half of what they earned to the gang. Whenever the gang demanded more, the throng would say, "Golly, we're already having a tough time. Do we really need to give you even more?" And the gang always said, "Yes, you must, or we shall unleash our legion of enforcers." Now the gang of a few hundred was getting trillions of dollars every year, spending it on wars and pyramid schemes, giving away goodies to their friends, buying influence, and doing lots of other things. And some of the throng started saying, "We don't really like the war you're waging with the money we give you. Do we really have to be paying for that?" And the gang said, "Yes, we demand it. Don't make us send out our legion of enforcers. And some of the throng said, you're taking our money and giving it to huge corporations and giant banks, and some people who just don't want to work. A lot of these things we don't like. And the gang said, we don't care. We will decide how to spend it. You just do as you're told, or else. And the throng said, okay, I guess we have to. But eventually the throng got so fed up, so angry, that they took a drastic step. One day they said to the gang, we don't like what you're doing. We want a new gang. And after pouring a huge amount of time and money into the effort, they replaced the gang with a new gang. Then the throng pleaded with the new gang, now, at long last, can we keep our own money, or at least keep more of it? And the new gang said, sorry, but after much discussion, we've decided that you can't. You have to keep giving us what you've been giving, in fact, a little bit more than before. The throng was distraught and said, this is dreadful. But after all, what choice do we have? I mean, they say we must comply, and they have that scary legion of enforcers. We're powerless against them. We'd better just do as we're told. So they did as they were told, got poorer, and lived miserably ever after. But after all, what else could they have done? What power could this throng possibly have compared to this gang of a few hundred and their enforcers? What chance would this thing have against this thing? How could these 100 million people ever hope to successfully resist the awesome power of this tiny little dot? In case anyone missed this, let's review. Here's them, here are their enforcers, here's us. Them, us. Them, us. Does anything about this seem just a little strange to you? Are you perhaps wondering, why does the throng need the permission of the dot to do anything? Why do these people feel the need to ask this tiny little dot if they can keep more of what they earn? Why would they spend year after year literally begging for lower taxes from this little dot? Is this dot just really darn intimidating? Is it very persuasive in its reasoning? To be blunt, why would this throng give a rodent's backside what this tiny little dot wanted? The fact that this tiny dot has the gall to issue such demands to such a throng is pretty startling in and of itself. But what is far more amazing is that the throng obeys this minuscule little parasitic gang of control freaks. What could possibly explain this? Let's ask the dot. This is how it works. When we, the dot, take your money and spend it on things you don't like, we're representing you. In fact, though you're not allowed to actually keep your own money, you're allowed to decide which little dot will steal half of what you earn. So that really means that you're in charge and that you're agreeing to give us your money. In fact, we, the dot, are serving you when we take your money and spend it on things you don't like. And so you should thank us and treat us with great respect and honor for having robbed you on your behalf for your own good in order to serve you by doing things you don't want us to do. So there you have it. I hope that cleared everything up for you.
If you're not entirely satisfied with the dot's explanation of things, you really should read the book The Most Dangerous Superstition, available now at Amazon.com.
And I'll pause it there. Yeah, I really do strongly recommend this book, The Most Dangerous Superstition. It's by Larken Rose, and it is a fantastic, well-written 200-page, I think, little paperback. But it really gets to the root of part of the problem with democracy, which is that we believe other people have authority to do things that we ourselves cannot do, right? And this goes back to the definition of enfranchisement that we looked at the start of this preamble ramble, where to enfranchise people is to give them the right to vote. Well, who's giving that right to vote? Where do rights come from? Are they concocted in a fancy building in the capital city of a country? Are they made by humans and written down on a piece of paper and we all agree on them? Well, most of us agree on them. And then as long as you have 51% agreeing on them, then the 49% have to just live under those rights and that arrangement, regardless of how they feel about it or whether or not they want to. So these questions are dealt with in this book, and I think it's a really good read, and I would like to recommend it. If you enjoyed Larken's kind of humor and the way he expressed those concepts in that short little video there, I think you will very much enjoy this book. LJ says, purchased A Dangerous Superstition a couple of weeks ago. It's my next book to read. Fantastic. Glad to hear it. And it's not ridiculously priced. I just saw as well on over on Odyssey, ESP says £207.66 used. And that is for this Jonas Salk book, The Survival of the Wisest. Yeah, it ain't cheap. And I got this one very accidentally, randomly, found a cheap copy and pounced on it. And then it showed up and it turned out it was signed, which is really nice. Somebody signed it. I don't know if the man himself signed it. Could be anyone, couldn't it? Anyone could get a pen and just sign it and then pretend it was now a signed copy. But yeah, I think would be a fantastic one to read on the channel at some point. So that's the Tiny Dot. These are the kind of concepts that are always left out of the discussion, right? If I wasn't aware of Larken Rose and his book and the next speaker that I'm going to show you, you could go around in circles. Like Frank said, the Wikipedia article is convoluted. You could go round and round in circles discussing these theoretical models. What it actually comes down to is, do other people have rights that you do not have? Because a group of people gets together and calls themselves a government, do they now have rights that you as an individual do not have? How does that work? Either all humans have the same rights, or we all have different rights. And if that's the case, where do they come from? We're being told, or some of us are being told, that things like a man and a woman are just socially invented ideas and they don't exist in reality. Well, I'm telling you that if you think some people have rights and more rights than others, then you're talking about a relativistic system of rights. You're not talking about objective rights. You're talking about you get to make it up. Just make it up. And just believe what you want to believe and bash people over the head who don't agree with your beliefs. That's the outcome of it. So this relativistic way, it never makes any sense. It's always illogical. It's always frustrating. You can never understand it because it's designed that way. Kind of like the concept of democracy, as admitted in that Wikipedia article, there's no clear definition. People are just throwing it around, spreading it into certain places of the world where they don't want it. And we're told that other countries are jealous of our democracy and our freedoms, and that's why they attack us, right? And yet there's no definition. So on the topic of democracy, I'll give you another book here, another recommendation. This is Hans Hermann Hoppe, Democracy, the God That Failed. The Economics and Politics of Monarchy, Democracy, and Natural Order. I haven't read this one. I've just read bits here and there. It's academic. You know, lots of footnotes, tiny text, but lots of footnotes at the bottom of the pages as well. So, very interesting. There's a lot of different systems out there. But what tends to happen is aspects of these different systems of how these systems work in reality are left out, right? And so to fill in the gaps, we have to go to people like Larken Rose with the Tiny Dot video, or we can also go to his Jones Plantation video. Now this one's a bit longer, so I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I will play you some of it. He's actually made this into a film, but you can watch this 12-minute version and you get the gist of what he's saying. So this is a kind of a parable. It's a narrative story, and it explains the similarities between a democratic system and another kind of system, which the concept and history of which we are probably all familiar with. I'm not going to say it right now. because it will trigger things in people's minds and ideas that will taint the message. But I'll play a bit of this. It's worth checking out in full. It's an incredible lesson.
Mr. Jones owned a cotton plantation and many slaves. One day he was talking to the owner of the plantation next to his, and Mr. Jones was lamenting the fact that times were tough. He was having to work his slaves harder than ever, and was having trouble with some of them being disobedient or trying to run away. The other plantation owner said he knew someone who could help.
Day 1.
One day Mr. Jones called his slaves together so a man named Mr. Smith could talk to them. Before beginning, Mr. Smith whispered to Mr. Jones, "Whatever I say, do not contradict me or interfere, and I promise you your slave troubles will end." "My name is Mr. Smith," he said to the slaves, "and this may be the happiest day of your lives. From today forward, you will no longer be slaves, but free men." Mr. Jones was so shocked he started to step forward, but Mr. Smith gestured for him to remain silent. He did, only because the other plantation owner had spoken so highly of Mr. Smith's skills. "You are no longer the property of Mr. Jones," Mr. Smith continued. "You are free. No more will you be forced to labor for the benefit of Mr. Jones. Now you can work for yourselves." Now the slaves were all murmuring and looking at each other. Many were smiling, many were looking puzzled. "In fact, you are now free to leave the plantation whenever you want," Mr. Smith said. "However, since we are surrounded by other plantations, if you leave, some other plantation owner will likely claim you as his own the moment you set foot on his property. So I urge you not to risk your newfound freedom by doing something so foolish.
It's brilliant. I urge you not to risk your newfound freedom by doing something so foolish as leaving.
Instead, I suggest that you stay here, no longer as slaves, but as willing participants and part owners of this plantation. Yes, this is now your plantation." Mr. Jones bit his tongue to keep from objecting. "For now, we might as well leave Mr. Jones in charge," said Mr. Smith, "since he's the only one with any experience at running a plantation, which is..."
So they leave Mr. Jones in charge because he's the expert, right? These newly freed slaves, they don't have any experience of running a plantation. So we got to leave Mr. Jones in charge because obviously out of everyone there, he's the one with the experience, with the knowledge, with the expert insight. He can understand all these things. He's got that first-hand experience. So it makes sense, right?
It's quite a complicated thing to manage. But he will no longer be your master, but just another worker on the plantation. In fact, he will now be using his organizational and management skills to serve you. Whatever problems you may have had with him before, you are now all equals, and you need each other to make this work.
It's brilliant. He's now serving you, just like the people you elect are serving you, just like the politicians are serving you.
If we all cooperate and work together, we can all reap the benefits together. In honor of this happy occasion, I present you this new symbol of togetherness and cooperation, this flag, which shall be the emblem of the new, free Jones plantation. He held up the new flag, but most of those listening were still too amazed to respond. "And this shall be our motto," Mr. Smith announced. "We work together as free men for our mutual benefit, pledging our allegiance to the Jones plantation, which stands for prosperity, liberty, and justice for all. To celebrate, everyone has the rest of the day off. Enjoy your freedom, do as you please, and be back here tomorrow morning, bright and early."
This works really well. You get in England, we call them bank holidays. We got a bank holiday on Monday. We get the day off. We don't have to go to work, just a free day off. Wow. What such freedom.
"So that we may begin work on this great and noble new endeavor as equal free men." Finally convinced that Mr. Smith was serious, the former slaves applauded and cheered.
Day 2.
So you can probably see where this is going. I might play the rest of day 2. It's kind of hard to stop. I know I keep stopping it and interrupting, but this whole video is so good, I might just play the whole thing.
"We all want this plantation to do well," Mr. Smith said at the beginning of the next meeting, "so we can all share in the benefits. We all know that it takes a lot of effort to make a cotton plantation work. Just because you're all free doesn't mean you can stop working. In fact, since you're now working for yourselves, I expect you to work even harder than ever before, but now with pride and joy, knowing that you're working for yourselves. Of course, there still have to be rules. If everyone just does whatever he wants, the plantation won't produce anything. This experiment will fail, and we'll all starve. You should be thankful that Mr. Jones has agreed to stay on to lend his knowledge and skills to this endeavor, and I trust you will all do your own part to make this work. Several of you have been chosen to act as project supervisors, to manage different aspects of the operation, to make sure everyone is doing his assigned job, to make sure that the rules are followed, and so on. The rest of you may head out to the fields to start your first day of work as free men."
Day 3.
Start your first day of work as free men.
The next morning, Mr. Smith had a grim expression on his face as the daily meeting began. "I have an unpleasant duty to do today," he said. "Yesterday, Charles was caught keeping some of the cotton he picked, presumably to sell for his own personal profit. That is against the rules. That is stealing. For that, Charles must be punished. Two men tied Charles to the whipping post. I take no joy in this, Mr. Smith continued, but you must understand, if we do not maintain order, if we do not have rules that we all abide by, then the plantation will fail, and we will all suffer. The whip cracked against Charles' back. But if we all pitch in for the common good, then we can all prosper. Being free doesn't mean you should be selfish and greedy. We must each do our assigned duties and obey the rules, and then we can all benefit, and each of you will receive your appropriate share of the profits. A young man named Samuel stepped forward. But if you and Mr. Jones decide the rules and whip us if we disobey, how is that any different from what we had before? How can you say that? Mr. Smith asked. I'm shocked. You were a slave before, and now you're free. Things still need to be managed and organized by those best qualified to do so. Do you know how?
Things still need to be managed and organized by those best qualified to do so.
How to run a plantation, Samuel? Well, no, he answered. But if we're free, why do we get no say in what the rules are and how things work? I'm surprised at your ingratitude, Mr. Smith answered. None of you know how a plantation is run, so you're in no position to be making decisions about how things are done here. You don't seem to appreciate all the things that Mr. Jones provides for you, from protecting you from all the outside threats that you know nothing about, those who would come here, capture and enslave you, if not for Mr. Jones' protection, to making sure that you all have food and housing, tools to work with, that you're cared for when sick and injured, and so on. There wouldn't be a plantation at all, no cotton to pick, no land to plant and harvest, if not for him. You should be grateful that he's made possible the level of comfort you now have. Your lives would be far worse if not for him. Nevertheless, as free and equal participants in this endeavor, from now on, at each meeting, any worker may have 2 minutes to ask questions or voice suggestions or complaints. With that, the workers all seemed satisfied and headed out again to the fields to pick the cotton.
Day 4.
I have a big announcement, Mr. Smith said as the daily meeting began. Mr. Jones' cousin is here, and not just to visit and see how our project is coming along. It has been decided that from now on, you will be deciding who will manage the plantation. Of course, this job can't be done by just anyone, but every 3 months we will have a special meeting at which all the workers will vote on whether we think Mr. Jones should run the plantation or whether we think his cousin, Mr. Johnson, should run the plantation. That means that ultimately you are in charge because you will be deciding which man you want running things on your behalf. If you don't like the way things are being managed, you now have the power to change it. Amazed and pleased, the workers headed out again to the fields to pick the cotton. Days passed, months passed, a year passed, and the plantation continued to operate as before. Sometimes Mr. Jones was in charge, sometimes Mr. Johnson was in charge, but the day-to-day routine stayed exactly the same. The workers worked hard, long hours every day, and still had little to show for it. Every day the meeting would begin with them all reciting the Jones Plantation motto, "We work together as free men for our mutual benefit, pledging our allegiance to the Jones Plantation, which stands for prosperity, liberty, and justice for all." One day Mr. Smith announced, "Samuel is asked to say a few words this morning, and whatever the rest of us may think of his ideas and opinions, we are all free here, and that means we are all allowed to speak our minds. So, Samuel, you have 2 minutes. Begin." Samuel stepped forward, looking scared. "I was excited when all this started," he began, glancing nervously at Mr. Smith and Mr. Jones. "But don't you all see what's happened here? Nothing has changed. We're all still slaves." There were grumbles of disagreement from the crowd. "They tell us what to do and whip us if we don't. They still make all the rules and punish us if we disobey. They let us make suggestions and complain about things, but they never really change anything. They let us choose between Mr. Jones and Mr. Johnson, but what's the difference? The situation stays the same. We do all of the work and they take as much as they want and decide how much they'll let us keep. They live in luxury, made rich by the cotton we pick. We do all the work and have to build our own huts, grow our own food, and take care of ourselves. They leave us just enough that we don't revolt or run away. This is not freedom. We're all still slaves. They've only changed the words they use, but nothing else has changed. They say we're all free and equal, but we're not. They command and we obey. That's not freedom. That's not equality. They say we're free to leave, but all that means is that we're free to be someone else's slave. Why should we work or obey the rules? We didn't agree to this. They made the system. They forced it on us. They control and rob us and call it freedom. They've deceived you into thinking that being able to choose which slave master you'll work for is the same as being free. It's not. Open your eyes. If you keep what you produce, they call it stealing. When they take what you produce, they call it sharing and fair distribution. Can't you see that this is all? Your time is up, Samuel, Mr. Smith announced calmly. At his gesture, 2 supervisors grabbed Samuel by the arms and led him to the whipping post. "I'm sorry, Samuel, but you've broken the rules. There are rules against encouraging others not to work and encouraging others to break the rules. You're only hurting all of us with your discontentment and your complaining and your disobedience." The whip fell and Samuel let out a grunt. "Without rules, without order, all would be lost. Without law, there would be chaos. We can't just behave as wild animals, each doing whatever he pleases. We must all follow the plan and all do our duty for the betterment of everyone. And those who do not must be punished." The whip fell again and blood flowed freely from Samuel's back. Samuel, it is you who are stealing from the others. When you don't do your assigned work, you are making more work for others. When you disobey the rules, it is you who are endangering the future of everyone else here. You are the thief. You are the criminal. You are the one trying to destroy the arrangement that keeps us all safe and prosperous. At every lash of the whip, the other workers cheered, louder and louder, some yelling curses at Samuel. Being spoiled and selfish, you complain about everything, talking as if you're oppressed. But you are the one ruining things. You are the one keeping us from being all we could be. It is your greed and your rebelliousness that is hurting all of us. They all play by the rules, Mr. Smith said, gesturing at the others. What makes you think that you don't have to? You think you're above the law? There were loud yells of agreement as the whip fell again. We must maintain order, Mr. Smith proclaimed, to make this plantation great, to make it so that we can all be happy and prosperous. To have the society we want, there have to be rules. We all have to contribute our fair share to this great endeavor, and we cannot tolerate actions and attitudes that seek to undermine the amazing things that together as free men we have achieved and will continue to achieve. Mr. Jones was smiling as he gave Mr. Smith a pat on the back. The crowd was cheering so loudly that none of them had noticed that Samuel had died.
What you have been taught about government and politics is no more accurate or reasonable than what Mr. Smith taught the slaves. If you're ready to look through the veil of rhetoric and propaganda to see the reality beneath, get a copy of The Most Dangerous Superstition. It will change the way you see the world.
Yes, indeed. Couldn't have said it any better myself. That story, that little video is so powerful. It really casts a new light on the system that we live in, what we are allowed to do, what we're not allowed to do, the people who are in charge. I really like it. It should cause one to start asking some questions. Where does authority come from? Where do rights come from? Do they exist? Is it just something we make up in our minds? Is it arbitrary? Is it relative? Is it just based on belief? And if so, what gives some of us the... Why are some people in a position to come up with rights and enforce them with the violence on monopoly and others are not, right? So a lot of questions, and I'm not saying I have all the answers, but the video really does a great job of at least provoking conversation, discussion, and that's about all we can do in a lot of cases. So we're nearly at the end of the preamble ramble, but I got another clip that I want to show. Very relevant to this whole topic. This is Mark Passio, and one of the things that he came up with was a sort of a revised political spectrum, because we're presented with this political spectrum which has a left side and a right side and then a centrist column in the middle, and you can either be a lefty or you can be a conservative and you can lean to the right. And the left side and the right side, they often are denoted with colors, red color and blue, and I always call it the red and the blue team, right? And we're told these are the only options that exist. This is the limits, the left side and the right side. And there is nothing else outside of that. There's no other way. We're living in the most evolved, advanced, organic system that has been around since humans ever... So it's strange, isn't it? Because that Wikipedia article said democratic groupings and systems have been around for as long as humans have been around. But then it also said that the systems are evolving and organic. And this latest dominant version of it, representative democracy, is the most common. So it's very convoluted, confusing stuff. Mark Passio has an amazing ability to bring clarity and really concise, he uses his words in a very clear, concise way. He often gives definitions, and he speaks with what might be called parrhesia. And if you're not familiar with that word, it's worth looking up and learning about parrhesia. Speaking truth, being very careful and deliberate with your words. Mark Passio, in my opinion, is fairly unmatched for a lot of reasons. Not saying he's right about everything, not saying everything he says is perfect and wonderful and flawless, and the man himself he's a man, right? But he works hard, and he's put out a phenomenal amount of work, which we can all benefit from for free. And this one is a recent one which came out the 2023, and it's an amazing presentation. It's called Two Masks, Same Face: The Dark Occult Origins of Nazism and Communism. Mindhack says this is Mark Passio's best work. I think you're right. I think this is his best work. It's 8 hours long, but it's worth it. It is so complete and so well-rounded. He doesn't leave anything out, really. And this is a little bit that I want to show you where he talks about the political spectrum. So this is the political spectrum as probably as you've never seen it. So we'll just play a little bit here. Obviously, I'm not going to play too much of this, and then we'll get on with tonight's reading. But hot off what we just learned from Larken Rose and the questions he was asking, that sets the context for this next bit, which I think is really important.
Get out of the mind control methodology that is waged against them of the political spectrum being a breakdown of left versus right-wing politics. This is the traditional view of the political spectrum, where you have on the left side communism and on the right side fascism. And then you have center politics in the middle, okay? There is no place on this chart for actual freedom or abolition of government. There is no place on this chart where the actual coercion and violence exercised over human beings to keep them under government control is absent. So it's all a form of slavery. It's all control over people, whether it's left-wing control or right-wing control. Okay, I have introduced what I call the true political spectrum to try to steer people away from falling into this mind control trap, because that's what it is. It's social engineering the existing publicly recognized political spectrum. Here's a far more accurate, what I call the true political spectrum, and I put even politics in quotes, in double quotes, because it's really not a spectrum of politics. This is a spectrum of human consciousness.
It's kind of hard to read, but I do have a close-up version of this that we can have a look at after. But just listen to his explanation for now.
By which there is only one razor's edge, a needle point where there's true freedom, in the middle at the top of the chart. And I know it may be a little bit small to read here in the audience. People can study it later in the slides. But basically, this axis at the bottom represents control of human beings. And the axis on the left-hand side represents consciousness of human beings. So as consciousness is low, control goes to total. And as consciousness is raised higher and higher, control is less and less and less. The only place where control is absent is in the middle at that 0 point, right at the very top of the mountain peak, or that needle point at the top. Okay, a very difficult place to go to and maintain that position. Most people slide down those slippery slopes very quickly. Okay, so you could see on the left, all the way to the far left, total control or slavery of human beings. You have communism or international socialism. Just to the right of that is democratic, incremental socialism. That's where this country is right now. We're sliding down the slope toward total control. But we're at that point where we are trying to institute democratic, incremental socialism. We're going to talk about that as an ideology later. Then you have a republic based on classical liberalism. Then you have libertarianism, slightly left-leaning perhaps. Then on the other side, you have maybe slight right-leaning libertarianism, and then a republic based on classical conservatism. Then corporate incremental socialism, which is what Nazism basically was, and the fascism under Mussolini in Italy. And then you have outright fascism, National Socialism being implemented as a slavery system. Okay?
I think that's enough of that one to get the point across. But the whole presentation is fantastic. I really encourage people to watch the whole thing. It's fantastic. And download a copy if you can. Take some notes. He drops a lot of names and a lot of new names as well. I think you will definitely learn something new, even if you are familiar with these topics already. But we'll just have a look at the that picture closer up. So this is the same picture again, but you can see that it's this 0 point here. That's where human freedom exists. It's a very, very thin line. And then you start to go away from human freedom. This is as people get lower in consciousness and become more animalistic and more base in their thinking and their behavior, in their morality. And this is when, as a result of that, a group of people can step in and claim that they are the arbiters of rights and freedoms, and they get to make the rules. And as we just heard in the Jones Plantation analogy, we're doing it for your benefit because we care about you and we're the experts and we're best placed to do this on your behalf, right? That's the line. Or I should remove N from that word and say that's the lie. But this is the real political spectrum. And it's a little harder to understand, but once you wrap your mind around it, you can really see how false the current paradigm is that most people believe and accept is the only political paradigm. And here's another version that I quite like as well. The real left-right political spectrum. And this one shows you on the very bottom here where you are free and where you are not free. And again, the free is a very, very thin slice right at the far end here. And the idea is that that nobody else can have rights that you don't have. Rights to make decisions, rights to take a certain percentage of your productivity away, rights to put you in a cage, rights to use violence against you, threats and coercion. Okay, if you don't have it, then how can somebody else have it? And they don't magically get it just because a group of people get together and say, we now bestow upon you the right to enact violence and put people in cages and take their stuff. Okay, that doesn't make sense as an explanation as to where rights come from. And then right at the very far end of this is authoritarianism, governmental ownership, mandatory participation. That's the key bit. It comes down to consent. Can you withdraw your consent and stop participating in the system? And then also centralization, and this is chaos, right? What has happened is in most people's minds, they think that top-down control of a minority over the majority is order, and a complete absence of a top-down control system would be chaos. And that's actually the inverse of the truth. There would be more order if there were no top-down system of control that everybody was forced to participate in and to fund and to be part of. Because there would be what James Corbett talks about in his book, and I discussed with him in my interview, there would be spontaneous order. And you can see this in action when you find groups of people together. It's not chaos. There is spontaneous order. People find roles, they establish routines, behaviors, they test boundaries and limits, but mostly people will figure that out. They don't need a top-down minority with all the guns and all the force and all the power to make up rules on their behalf. So that's about all I got to say on that. That's where considering democracy and thinking about it and coming up with an intro that helped shine perhaps a new light on the topic for people. That's what I came up with. I thought Larken Rose and Mark Passio are two fantastic resources, as well as books such as Democracy, the God That Failed, Hans Hermann Hoppe. I'll flash that one back up for you again for those of you who want to note that down. And then don't forget, we also talked about Seeds of Deception if you want to learn a little bit about GMOs and how safe they are. Spoiler alert. Not very.